Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today I've got 5 putting tips that you probably haven't heard before, or if you have heard them before, maybe you just need to hear them again. The first tip's really very simple, and it's all about getting the club to hover above the ground. And instead of doing it by kind of straightening your legs, lifting up your spine angle or bending your elbows, what I think you should be doing is basically placing the club on the ground and then making sure that you are gripping the club tight enough to actually lift it off the ground. When you tighten your grip, what you're actually doing is you're shortening the muscles in your hands and in your forearms, and that will actually be able to pick the club slightly off the ground. If you keep the same tension then in your grip throughout your stroke, the club will almost hover in the same distance off putter. You might actually find that you're gripping the club and you're feeling very tightly. Don't worry about this too much. I know that everybody's always saying you should have a loose grip. It's all about feel, and I'll be talking about feel with the tip later. But I believe that if you get that feeling of being able to hold the whole weight of the club just through the tension of your grip, you are going to basically rule out any chance of you're catching the ground in your swing, and at the same time not have the club so far off the ground that you're basically topping it. Tip number 2 is all about the positioning of your eye relative to the ball. And I'm talking about your lead eye here. Basically, in a putting movement, the deepest point in your putting movement should be across from the axis. And if you're keeping your axis still more or less across from your nose, that means that a ball which is across from your lead eye is going to be hit ever so slightly in the upswing, which will help it to get a little more of topspin and actually help the ball to roll out better. What I've heard a lot of times talked about, however, is that you should have your lead eye directly over the ball in the address position. This is extremely difficult, especially if you aren't playing a very steep angled putter. Having a steep angled putter will allow you to get pretty close to the ball, but a lot of you are playing with so-called face balance putters that have a slight knick in the shaft, and therefore they have a flatter lie angle, and they will virtually force you to stand a little bit further away. I don't want you to worry about this whatsoever. If you look at the majority of tour professionals, their lead eye is also not directly over the ball, but it does tend to be at least on the same height or line as the ball seen from a front camera. So if you can get yourself set up to the golf ball so that your lead eye is more or less on the line behind the ball, then you're going to give the ball a little bit of topspin. Tip number 3 is all about judging the distance. Now, I think we all know that mechanically, if you were to take the club back further, you could hit it further. Similarly, if you increase the tempo of your swing, you can hit it further. But with the people that I talked about who are really good putters, very few of them can actually tell me how they're doing it for any given putt. And in truth, I believe that you shouldn't really be thinking about that whatsoever. On the contrary, all you should be thinking about is how the ball is going to roll to the target. If you can imagine the starting velocity of the ball, how the ball breaks over distance, and then its finishing speed, the speed that the ball has when it hits the hole, your body should be able to do the rest by itself. In truth, you wouldn't think about your arm when you're throwing a ball to somebody. On the contrary, you would imagine the flight and then you would throw it. If you're playing darts, you're not thinking about when to open your fingers. And if you go bowling, you're thinking of the skittles at the bottom of the lane and the speed that the ball's going to hit the skittles, rather than you're going to actually be thinking about should I be getting more run up or how quickly am I going to swing my arm? And it's the same thing here for putting. So what I'm actually doing is trying to imagine the entire roll of the ball to the hole. If you're finding that difficult, I would really recommend that you just simply go onto a green and roll a few balls to the hole. Try and get the visual of it. Obviously, when you're putting, you can't do this. However, by doing this on a regular basis, you will get a feeling for the roll of the ball, what it looks like, how quickly has it got to start, how much will the green slow it down, and what kind of speed should it be going when it actually reaches the cup. Really imagining a roll is more like remembering the way it rolled. And if you get yourself aligned correctly and you just leave it to your feeling, you will be amazed how good your body is at simply rolling the ball up to the hole. I think I'm going to have to do a bit more practice. Tip 4 is maybe a little bit out there, and I'm sure that not everybody will agree with me, but my opinion is that in the recent years, people are getting stiffer and stiffer when they're putting. Obviously, I understand the logic that the less moving parts, the more reliable a movement ought to be, and I'm sure for a machine or a robot or something of that sort, that's totally true, but for a human being, I'm not totally convinced. When I make a full swing, the direction that I'm swinging my shoulders is in no way, hopefully, being changed by my moving my lower body. And I think, and I've seen an awful lot of golfers really trying to hold their legs and their knees and their hips and everything so stiff that they are actually getting in the way of a simple and a relaxed pendulum movement with their shoulders. Everything is connected in the body, and therefore anything which is resisting the movement will have an influence on other moving parts. On top of this, the research I've been doing is basically telling me that your small brain is reliant on feedback that it's getting from your feet. Even when you're putting a ball, there will be a very slight change of pressure between your feet and the ground being transmitted through your legs, up through your back and up to your brain, so that your brain knows where you are in the pendulum movement and when the ball's likely to turn up. This again is a very small thing, but it might well help you to get rid of those kind of yippy kind of putts that you're hitting. So what I'd just like you to do is get your shoulders moving and just don't restrict your hips. I don't want them doing this. I know that will change the angle of your spine. However, if you were to allow your hips to rotate ever so slightly, especially by longer putts, I'm sure you're going to get a far more flowing movement, and it's going to be far easier to judge distance. Stop worrying about movement. Movement is natural, and allowing a little bit of movement in your lower body won't necessarily mean that you're going to miss all of your putts. On the contrary, it might actually allow you to judge the distance of your putts a great deal better. You see? My final putt tip I've actually done a video on already, and I shall leave a link of it up here, but I still believe that if you want to get a decent contact and get a good energy transfer onto the ball, you've got to be accelerating the putter through the ball. The majority of golfers will tend to take the club far too far back and then slow down into impact. And it's very important to actually be accelerating through the ball. And for this reason, I like people to feel like they're going to swing through to a position outside of their lead foot in the follow-through, irrespective of the distance of the putt. So even if you're hitting a very short putt, you should be simply taking it back shorter, but still getting through at least to your lead foot. This isn't a station that you have got to stop in, especially on longer putts. I don't have a problem with you swinging even further through, but what I'm trying to get away from is the feeling of people basically stopping on the ball. By accelerating through the putt, you're giving the putter more inertia, you're making it more stable if you don't get a center hit, and you're making the transfer, the energy transfer onto the golf ball far more reliable, which will obviously help you with the distance control. Every putt you hit, you should be getting through to at least outside of the lead foot. Hope you like the tips. If they helped you, please hit the like button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. Big thanks to all of my patrons. If you'd like to be a patron, support the channel on a monthly basis, I'll leave a link below. We'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.